to the Aubergine Chef. Today we'll be making petit fours, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to be making petit four glacé. Now petit four glacé are those typical petit fours that are, called petit fours if people see them. They're like small little square cakes, although they can be like diamonds or circles or whatever, but typically they're like little cubes, and they're coated with glazing or coating fondant, whatever. It's not the same as the fondant that you use to do cakes. That's called rolled fondant. Typically it's called glazing fondant or just plain fondant. And then it's finished off with some kind of decoration, usually like a little piped filigree design made out of chocolate, or they can be turned into anything. Now, petit fours are really unique, as in that petit fours can really be almost anything. All petit four means is a dessert that can be eaten in 1 to 2 bites. Petit four literally translated means like small oven or tiny oven, and what it's referring to is the size of the dessert. Now, petit four glacé, that's a pretty specific kind of petit four that applies to the ones we'll be making today. Anything else that's like coated with icing or whatever. Then there's petit fours sec and petit four demi-sec, and those are both typically kind of cookies. Petit four sec is dry, so that's more like a mini chocolate chip cookie, for example. Petit four demi-sec, which is semi-dry, that's like a mini Oreo. It's usually something like, there's something in it that's like softer or adds a moistness to it. Like think of a small cookie with a raspberry filling in the middle, that kind of thing. And there's also something called petit four berries, which is basically everything else. Cream puffs, tiny eclairs, stuff like that. So you can see that petit four really is a really broad category on its own. But typically when people say petit four, they typically think of what we're making today, petit four glacé. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the cake. Now you can use just about any cake that you want. For petit four glacé, my chef, and so I will, recommend using a really dense cake. Pound cake, if you have a really good recipe, is a really good cake to use. You don't want something that's going to have a lot of crumbs falling apart. What I'm going to do today is something called frangipane, and that's made with almond paste, so it's going to have a nice almond flavor to it, and it's a very, very dense cake. So the first thing I've done is I've already greased and prepared my sheet pan for the oven. I'm also preheating my oven to 400 degrees. We'll be putting on the middle rack, and on the rack below we have an empty sheet pan, so that way we can help even out the temperature in the oven. Now I've also already cracked 4 eggs, and I have 1.5 ounces of all-purpose flour. I have 2 sticks or 8 ounces of butter. It's been softened to room temperature. And I'm going to go ahead and weigh out 12 ounces of almond paste. Now you can find almond paste in the store. Sometimes they come in a little tube or in a can. It's kind of expensive. These cans are about $7 to $8 a piece. So it's a little pricey. Same thing with marzipan, which we'll be using later. That usually comes in a tube, but it can also come in a can. You can also make that from scratch. I'm not going to make it from scratch just because it requires even more almond paste. So I'm like, if I'm going to pay for the almond paste, I'll also just get the marzipan. I don't really need that much anyway. But I will put the recipe for the marzipan on my website. So that way, if you do want to make your own marzipan, it's available to you. So why don't we go ahead and, we'll go ahead and weigh out our almond paste. And then we'll go ahead and start mixing our ingredients together. It's a pretty quick recipe. It's not very long at all. Okay, so actually the very, very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the butter in the mixing bowl. Now remember, you don't want your butter super, super soft. So if you have cold butter, you also don't want to use cold butter. You can warm it up in the microwave, but don't get it to the point where it's like liquid. You want it to have some kind of body to it. And we'll go ahead and put this on the mixer. Okay, so now the almond paste. Now, almond paste doesn't come out of the can really easily. So what you can do is you can take out the bottom of the can as well. Just being really, really careful, you can go ahead and just push it right through. just like that. Super easy, right? Now it's a good trick if you're ever in a situation. You know how those cans have those pull away tabs now? Well, if you break the tab off, which doesn't happen often, but it can happen. It happened to me once or twice. Just flip the can over and open it on the other side. It's like one of those common sense things you just don't think about, but you know, there you go. Okay, so all we need is 12 ounces of almond paste. The rest of it you can store in a plastic bag. You can store it at room temperature, it's fine. Now you want to go ahead and break up the almond paste. You don't want to have any large, huge pieces like this, because when you add it to the mixer, it's just not going to be a good thing. It's not going to be a good thing. What's going to end up happening is you're going to be pushing around this big ball of almond paste around. So just tear up into smaller pieces, so that way your mixer can handle it better. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and, using the paddle attachment, you want to go ahead and beat your butter just to lighten it up. Okay, now that your butter is nice and light, let's go ahead and take it out of the mixer, and we're gonna put it back on the plate or a bowl or whatever. You're just gonna hold it separately until we're ready to use it again. And then you want to go ahead and add your almond paste to this bowl. You don't have to clean it out first. Okay, and go ahead and mix your almond paste on a low speed. And then what we're going to do is, somewhere halfway through where we want it to be, we're going to go ahead and add 1 egg. Let's go ahead and add 1 egg. And what we're doing is we're trying to lighten up the almond paste and make it light and airy, kind of like how the butter was. It's gonna take a lot of mixing, but it'll get there. Okay, so our almond paste is nice and light. So we're going to go ahead and add our butter now. Just make sure to scrape down the sides. Okay, start on low speed until it's all incorporated. You want to go ahead and mix it on medium speed until it's nice and light and airy again. Okay, so it's very light now. It's almost white in color, if you can see. Go ahead and scrape down your bowl again. We're going to go ahead and on a low speed and go ahead and incorporate the rest of our eggs. Let's drop them in one by one. and scrape down your sides again. Go ahead and mix it up real well. Okay. And then on a very low speed, go ahead and slowly add in your flour. Okay, let's go ahead and take this off the mixer. Okay, go ahead and finish mixing it by hand. Alright, and you want to go ahead and turn this out onto a sheet pan. Now, this won't rise or anything. It's pretty much going to hold its shape. So what you want to do is you want to make sure it's as flat as possible. Flat and even. Okay, let's go ahead and put this in a 400-degree oven, and we're going to bake it for about 10 minutes. We're going to go ahead and check it at 10 minutes and see if it's done. And then we're going to go ahead and let it, take it out and let it cool. But make sure you put this on your middle rack with a sheet pan below it, or you can always double pan it too. I used to double pan everything, but I'm kind of liking them. I think my oven responds better if I have a sheet pan on an empty rack below it. It seems to work out pretty well. So let's go ahead and put this in the oven, 400 degrees for about 8 to 10 minutes. Okay, so our almond, or our French pan cake has come out of the oven, and it's nice and cool now. It started getting a little bit dark on the bottom, so I went ahead and double panned it anyway. So just keep that in mind when you're making it at home. Now, to release it, place a piece of parchment paper on top. Make sure you run your knife along the sides first. Place another sheet pan of the same size on top. And flip it over. And it should come right out. There you go.